Hello and welcome to the Navel Gays, a podcast about autosexuality. We are back and we are joined this week with a very special guest, Moon. Moon is an 18-year-old sister, formerly trans-identified person. Moon, in the short time that I've known you online, I've seen you go through sort of work out, I guess, some of your identity, and I've seen you use the term femboy and things like that. So hopefully we can get into some of that, but welcome. Thank you for coming to talk to us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Yeah.
Awesome. So I figure you can start by just giving us a little bit about your story, telling us when the sort of gender feelings came online for you, a little bit about your, trans identity, and then obviously for the purposes of this show, when you realized or conceptualized your experience as being autogynephilia and autosexuality. So if you could walk us through that would be great.
Yeah, sure. I think I first ever got any kind of like gender related feelings, I guess, was when I don't exactly remember, but I know I was very young, maybe around 8, I suppose. I remember I was at like, I think I've said this before, but I was at like a pool party at my aunt's house. And I remember my aunt's joking I was going to end up like my cousin who had this big bushy beard, very big, very manly, looked very, big, strong, and that very much terrified me as like a little kid. I hated the idea of having any kind of facial hair. I was terrified of getting an Adam's apple. And that very much was just something that I never wanted. It was a very scary thing to like think about, I guess, which I guess sort of plays into autoandrophobia of like, the phobia part of it, I guess. Also, as like I sort of started puberty, I remember I would very much like, I don't know if compulsively is the right word, but I would very much like intensively shave my body hair. And I would try to also keep it a secret, at least not my family obviously knew. And they never really understood why, but I would try to hide it from like my friends. I was like terrified of like one of my friends seeing like, hey, why do your legs look shaved? Or like, why do they used to be really hairy? Now it's not. So I kind of would try to hide it from my friends. And when I was shaving like my body hair, it would like start with like legs, and then it would get to my stomach, and then arms, and slowly just different parts of my body I would shave. And yeah, and I also around 10, I think, was when I sort of first I just thought about maybe being trans, I guess. I remember, telling a friend, I was thinking I was playing like Roblox or something with them, and I would tell them that I wanted to be a girl or I was trans or whatever, and they were kind of grossed out by it, and I sort of just was like, okay, never mind, I'm joking, and just sort of threw that away. And that also sort of plays into how I actually started, I guess, becoming trans-identified. What
did trans mean to you at that point? So you're about 10 years old. The year is what, 2017, 2018, yeah. Something like that. Yeah. 10's obviously young. So what did that mean to you? What was your understanding of trans? Did you know any trans people?
I think I saw it after like hearing about Jazz Jennings or something like that. And, I was just this person who was born a boy and wanted to be a girl. And I don't think it was I don't know. I was sort of like, I guess, how like majority of when younger kids find out about a trans person and like, oh, I want to do that. I think it was sort of that for me, I guess. But also
I don't think a majority of kids feel that, but I think
yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah, right. People who are going to go on to identify as trans might feel that and might have that experience young. But yeah, I don't think that actually is like a normative experience. But I hear you. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead and continue.
Yeah, I don't know. I just heard someone say it was. I don't know.
No, well, it's the type of thing. These things get said. And this is something I feel like Aaron and I talk about sometimes. We're like autosexuals, especially, we think we'll sort of like talk about things as if like, yes, this is obviously everyone experiences this. Like, of course, who wouldn't want to do this? And it's like, no, actually, I think this is a pretty rare response actually to this type of stimulus or whatever.
I think a lot of people in general can kind of just, especially when it's something that people don't often talk about, people just sort of assume that their experience, like their internal experience is universal. is the normal experience. But yeah, when it comes to the autosexual one, it's just like we have this specific version, and yeah, we just assume that tend to assume that it's shared when it's pretty niche. Yeah,
that's a very good point, Aaron. That it's not necessarily specific to autosexuals. This is just something that people do. They they assume that other people are experiencing things the same way that they are.
Right.
Yeah. As I guess I was saying, it sort of played into how I became trans identified and like started my social transition, because I started my social transition at 14. And it was after I went to this sort of like LGBT camp and became friends with a bunch of like AFAB trans people who are trans identified females or whatever you like to call it, I guess, from like non-binary, trans FDMs, etc. Right. And I remember telling them.
How did you end up at this camp?
I was out to my parents, I guess, as like bisexual. I sort of went there like that, and my mom was like, "Oh, she suggested it. She brought it up. I guess she heard about it. She was like, you might want to go there, make friends, etc." Me personally, I was mostly interested in finding a boyfriend, I guess, which is going there, I guess. But when I went there, I made a lot of friends, I guess. But I went there and I met these friends, and I remember telling them that story. And they sort of were like, well, do you want us to try out using she, her pronouns for you or something like that? And I sort of just, that's how it kind of just started. And it just kind of went along like that. And I just kept doing it. And until like, I guess, I don't know if I should say like fully desisted, because I don't think I ever fully, I guess, desisted as in like I didn't fully consider myself some kind of trans identity, but I more so presented more as my, I guess, birth sex or natal sex, and sort of more so that, so I kind of call it desisting, but it's not like fully abandoning. It was like, oh, I'm just non-binary or something like that, I guess. And
so you say you kind of went from having like a kind of a more binary trans woman identity to a non-binary more identity. Okay.
Yeah, and it was I wanted, I guess, some of those times that I did that, I wanted to fully desist. I wanted to like fully go back to, I guess, living as like a effeminate boy. But I was sort of scared of like backlash I would get for that from like my friends, like losing them or some kind of other like backlash or like whatever, and so I kind of just settled for that, to like sort of stay with them. And there were times where I would go back into like, oh, I'm a trans woman again, and it would be on and off, I guess, that sort of identification with like that sort of identity, and until very recently, I guess, where I sort of just talked to a few people and, who were sort of, I guess, I don't know if I want to say convinced me, but sort of like encouraged me to like sort of take the path of just fully desisting, I guess, and just trying it out again, because like I don't have that sort of, oh, sorry for cutting you off, but sort of like not having that fear of losing anyone by desisting, I guess. So like try it without, having that fear, I guess.
So does that mean that you don't still have those same friends, sort of?
Yeah,
like
no.
I mean, you're in a different place. You
Yeah.
graduate school now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Okay. And how do you feel about this full desistance, as you're putting it?
Well, I don't know. It's sort of, I sort of still like feel on the fence about transitioning, I suppose. I'm very much like giving it a try, but there's also a part of me that wants to just also try transitioning, and medicalizing and stuff.
Okay, so maybe let's talk about that a little more, because the way you're describing the sort of queer identities that you went through, there was a social component.
Yeah.
It's very AFAB. Right, like riding the non-binary train on and off and stuff. Yeah, that is what we see with a lot of the females with gender dysphoria and stuff. But the way you were describing it, it sounds like there was a big sort of social component that was like you were in a queer group of friends, and you haven't yet expressed the sort of internal motivation for it, but now you're telling us, now that you've sort of gone on the path of desistance, that actually you are still pretty tempted to take it even further than you did before and try medicalizing. So this brings us into sort of like typology and stuff, and we can sort of slowly work our way there. But why do you want to why do you want to medicalize? Why do you want your body to change? What are some of the internal motivating factors for you?
I mean, there's a few. Part of it is also just that I want to like just see, because like I feel like there's a lot of things that in life that I look back on and wish I should, what if I guess, and I feel like that would be, if I don't transition, it would be one of those things. That's some part of it, and another part of it is like some of the effects that I guess I want. One of the biggest one is sort of like a drop in libido, I guess.
Okay.
And sort of like maybe passing better, and sort of just, I guess, like more better assimilation, I suppose.
Okay, so you say better assimilation.
I guess as in like,
but
as like a female, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so some of these things obviously sort of make sense in the frame of autoandrophobia, right? In the frame of autogynephilia, of sort of feeling discomfort with your male sex drive, wanting that to diminish, and wanting, it's interesting the words you use, like wanting to pass better. But right now you are in theory sort of living as a desisted male, right? And so it's like, yeah, you actually want to look more like a female. What you say about the sort of what ifs and feeling like you might regret not trying. I wonder if, I'm sure trans people have spoken about this dilemma before, and this is something that we spoke about with, or I know Taff has talked about it. I think we spoke about it in our interview, but it might have been in other interviews that she did. But there's the people, it's a catch-22 of transition, right? And of this desire to transition, because you'll hear from people who have transitioned and theoretically successfully transitioned, like Taff as an example, who are sort of ambivalent about it, right? Feel like now that they have transitioned, if they were able to sort of satiate that curiosity and like get to the other side, now that she kind of feels like maybe she could have just lived as, an AGP man. But she acknowledges what you're talking about, which is it's easy to say now that she's on the other side of it. Whereas if you don't do it, you are there, that yearning exists. But it really is a catch-22, because there's no guarantee, right, that you're going to be happier on the other side of it. And it's not a simple thing to do. I think it should go without saying that we're not here to try to convince you like in or out of it. I think sort of our position in general. But yeah, that's a real challenge. Basically, it's the temptation of the unknown, and the what ifs. So talk to us a little bit about, you said you went through a phase of, before we started recording, you said you went through a phase of thinking of yourself as HSTS. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that, and if you can incorporate into that sort of where and maybe when, also, just to give us a timeline of when you encountered even the typology.
Yeah, I think I first encountered it, I want to say 17. I didn't fully understand it. I remember there was this group of people who I thought was cool, and they apparently saw my username and called me AGP. It was on a Twitter space or something. And at first, like, I was in sort of this true transmedicalist sort of mind frame at the time, and I saw it like AGP as like the stereotypical bad trans, I guess, and I didn't see that for myself. I didn't try to portray myself in that kind of way, and I was confused by it, and I was sort of like, why did they say this? Why did they think this? And I think it was mostly because they believed in the typology, because I guess in my bio I had that it said that I was bisexual, and I think it was from that, and I think that was how I first encountered it. I never fully like encountered the typology and sort of, I guess, was that sort of, I guess, how I encountered it. And I didn't fully believe in it at the time. I thought, oh, it can't be like all these, anyone who's attracted to a woman who's a trans woman can't be just like, this group that I had this sort of view upon as the gross fetishist, bad trans, the ones who are going to freak out in public, you never pass, etc. Don't put in effort, all those like kind of bad things around or stigmatization or whatever word you want to use around AGPs.
Right.
And I was very much confused. I never started, I guess, believing in it until I sort of watched Ray Alex's Williams videos. I remember watching them and I sort of had a existential crisis because at the time I very much like had that sort of view that these are the bad people. These are the people who are making my life worse. This is what is destroying my path to acceptance, all that kind of stuff. And I resonated with a lot of the ways that he described AGP outside of just, gross fetishist who's euphoria boner, etc. Like things that I never experienced, things I never sort of resonated with. And now he's describing it in this other way that I'm resonating with. And
what did you resonate with? If you have any examples.
I'd have to think for a second to like put my finger up.
Sure.
I think one was sort of like viewing yourself in more of a romantic way instead of a fetishistic way. Sort of like a romantic attraction to oneself, I guess, because I remember in the past when I was like sort of like at the beginning of my social transition, I said that sometimes I have a hard time differentiating between a crush and gender envy. So which is something that he brought up, and I had said that I had felt that kind of experience. So it was like that was another thing that I sort of resonated with. Yeah.
Now looking back though, do you think that anyone kind of identifies with or relates with the caricature version of AGP?
I think there are definitely some people out there, but I think there's also some people who don't, I guess,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just look at it and I can't imagine anyone being, oh yep, that's my experience. Freaking out in public and
Well, that's kind of Nora's shtick, but I can't tell how much of that is like a bit of self-deprecation and
probably
edgelordiness. But yeah, right. That's a great point. And it again just I won't go on too much of a tangent, but it gets to the crux of the problem with the gender critical movement's current messaging. Is if you only explain it as the boogeyman, you're not going to fight this enemy if they don't even recognize themselves as who you're talking about. So okay, that makes a lot of sense. I've heard other people also say that it was when they heard someone conceptualize it as romance and sort of a romantic attachment or attraction to the idea of yourself as the opposite sex, that made more sense to them. I think the gender envy thing, is it a crush or do I want to be with them or do I want to look like them? That is this just super salient thing that's hard to get around, right? Yeah. And it's this thing, like you said that you vocalized this before you had ever heard of AGP. And that was a thing for me too. I remember in the sort of weeks leading up to me talking about autoandrophilia with my wife, she had said like that exact thing. I had asked her about if she remembers having crushes on men or boys or stuff like that. And she said basically like, yeah, she would like, she didn't know if she was attracted to them or wanted to look like them, right? She would be attracted to guys, but she would really want to look like them. And that's just like, it feels like an elephant in the room with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, that was, and that was also something I heard from like other people. So I sort of just thought as just regular, like other trans identified people.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And in the trans kind of sphere, we say, oh, that's just gender dysphoria, over and over again. Oh, that's just gender dysphoria. Yeah. Because gender dysphoria is auto-heterosexuality.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry, I cut you off. Carry on.
Oh, no, that's all right. Yeah. I also I remember when I also discovered the typology, I was very much like trying to, I had a weird obsession of putting other people in boxes as well, which I guess isn't merely the best thing. I don't know. But I sort of like would conceptualize where would this person I know fit? Where would this person I know fit? And I remember the same person who I originally heard also say that about the gender envy thing. They were I guess, lesbian identified. So I was like confused. They called themselves a lesbian. I don't, but yeah. And I was very confused.
Male, MTF,
Yeah.
an
Yeah,
MTF.
yeah.
Okay.
They were, yeah, and it was very like, I don't know how to like figure that out. So it was like, this is like, it confused my brain, I guess, a little bit, that one individual. But yeah.
There seems to be a number of people who are like, all the, gynophilic trans women are AGP except me. It's just kind of bizarre.
Yeah.
Like you can't, if you can't see it, surely you realize that everybody else sees it, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah, totally. Well, and interestingly, like Ray just said something a couple minutes ago to us in a group chat, and he was saying like that he's seeing this interesting phenomenon of like sort of TRA trans women acknowledging that AGP exists, but just saying that it only applies to a small minority of people, but acknowledging that it's real. And I feel like I'm seeing this more and more, and kind of like what you're saying, Aaron. And it feels like it feels like a move in the right direction. It's like people are talking about it more, and it's almost becoming something that's too hard to deny at this point, especially because there are people owning it. So even, there are people owning it who are pro-trans. And so that puts these other trans people in a difficult position, because then you have to start denying people's lived experiences and stuff. And so, you have people acknowledging that AGP exists. And Moon, what you're describing of like starting to categorize people, and you're right, we should all, it's natural. It's not a nice thing to do publicly all the time. And, Aaron and I have dealt with the fallout of doing some of that stuff. But even the patron saint of trans, ContraPoints, did this. And she talks about it in her Autogynephilia, in her AGP video, of like, she started, going through the type A and type B of all of her trans friends. And so it is kind of a natural thing to do when you see it. So this was introduced to you by people basically calling you AGP. And then you started to look into a little bit more and started categorizing other people. At what point did you decide that this, well, okay, I guess you said you saw one of Ray's, or you were watching some of Ray's content, and it gave you a more palatable description of what AGP is. So I guess, where are you now with all of that?
Like how so, I guess.
Well, maybe we can tie this in with the HSTS thing too. So you felt like this couldn't possibly apply to you, right? Because you're not gross and disgusting. And so, but you were identifying as bisexual. So how and when did you start to conceptualize yourself as the good trans, aka HSTS, and then how did you land where you are now?
Yeah, I sort of, first time I ever considered myself HSTS, I talked to Ray Alex Williams like in a comment section about like, where do you think I fit? And he was, I think he thought I was HSTS there. Because like I the only kind of woman, because like I was bisexual and I was attracted to only like the only kind of like females I was ever attracted to were trans men. Never like their average like feminine woman. It was always like very masculine woman, women who practically were on the verge of looking like a man or looked like a man. And so I sort of said that. I was like, I don't know, because like I'm attracted to this. And he said, it sounds like you're this. And I sort of described my motivation for transitioning. Well, not my motivation for transitioning, but I remember the first time I guess I should have also brought this up before when I was telling my story about like gender feelings. I remember when I was younger in like middle school, a lot of the guys that we get crushes on were straight, and I would wish that I was a girl so I could be with them, I guess. And I sort of just told that to him, and he said, that sounds, I guess, like HSTS, and that's how I sort of came around to thinking that I was. And yeah,
that makes sense. And I think that's something that people, when you state it simply like that, it's easy to see how you could interpret it as HSTS. But I think when you describe the type of women that you're attracted to me, that just screams AGP. is being attracted to women who are more masculine so that you would be the more feminine one in the partnership. And I think, this is all sort of complicated, but I think most homosexual men wouldn't consider themselves into butch lesbians, right? Or like trans men. Most, I'll put a big asterisk there. And you were identifying.
But if they are, I would question if they belong to the gay category. It's like
question their ideology.
Right.
Their homosexual ideology.
Yeah.
But you were also identifying as bisexual, and this gets complicated by age. And this is not to like condescend at all. It's just like I don't know, and you really don't need to share because you are young, and so really any of your dating history and stuff is getting back to you being like under 18. But like, did you date girls? Like, what did you date boys? How did this bisexuality? I mean, you were identifying as bisexual really young. So
yeah.
How did that come about?
So I originally, when I was very young, I think around 11, I thought I was gay. I thought I only liked boys, and that's all I would ever get crushes on. I would never get crushes on girls. And I remember not coming out. I was outed by, I guess, my second boyfriend in middle school. And I was treated very differently by a lot of my guy friends. They would they wouldn't want to they would never want to touch me because they thought I'll get into them or something like that. And I sort of tried to date girls to make them think that I like girls. And I remember along the way, I became very emotionally attached to this one girl. And that sort of made me think, oh, I guess maybe I'm bisexual. And that's sort of how I came about that. I got into the relationship not really being attracted to her, but then over a while I was very emotionally attracted to her, I guess. But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that sort of would have changed as you entered into high school, because right in middle school age, boys and girls are still pretty much a lot of times around the same size. There's not as much of a size differential. So I'm thinking with the AGP gender dysphoria, at the older you get, the more your size and stature is quite contrasted by being with a girl. Does that have anything to do with maybe a lack of attraction to girls is just and more of an attraction to males is more of that one induces dysphoria and the other doesn't? Is that part of your experience of attraction at all?
Are you saying me being with a feminine woman makes me dysphoric, I guess? Or
right. Yeah. I'm wondering about the attraction, because that's what I think a lot of what we do here on the Navel Gays, right, is talking about metasexuality and how a lot of our external attraction is based on how our attraction to or being with those people makes us feel about ourselves. And so I think being so you having an attraction to very masculine women or FTMs or whatever, that makes sense because you can see yourself as feminine relative to them, as more feminine, but not being attracted to feminine women because then I imagine there's that. It's not so much of attraction and dysphoria are the opposite sides of the same scale, I think, in this conversation. So it's how much attraction you feel towards someone it's completely interrelated with how dysphoric or not dysphoric you feel relative to that person. So I guess that's my question, is how much of the, as you get older, obviously, that's what I say, in middle school, boys and girls are still about the same size. And so I suspect that gender dysphoria, it wouldn't be as much, it would increase as high school goes on and puberty, more and more sexually dimorphizes, teenagers.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I don't know if it got worse. I don't know. I'm trying to think. I don't know.
Fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Specific question.
Well, and it's all still relatively recent for you,
right.
You're just coming out of high school, really. So I'm interested in okay, before I change the subject, if you want to continue on to sort of like seeing yourself as HSTS, because I want to pick that apart a little bit, but maybe you should just sort of describe it in your own words, like when you came to that conclusion. And doing that requires a reconceptualization of your own sexuality. And we see this very often with trans women. They sort of find out about the typology and they drop the bisexual, and they've come to Jesus, but they're actually only into men. And again, this is coming from someone who believes that sort of metasexuality can be someone's like primary sexuality, and that could be fulfilling and wonderful and great. So I'm not at all trying to dissuade you from being with men. That might be the best path for you. You know, kudos to you and your consenting partners and all of that. But yeah, when did you start to conceptualize yourself as HSTS and sort of exclusively into men?
I think also around the same time that I sort of thought I was HSTS, I was questioning if I was gay, because even like before I heard of like the typology, I was like, I remember a while, if you could like, you could probably find it on my Twitter, but I asked like, help, I think I'm gay. And I was asking for help because I was with a girl at the time, and I was questioning, well, am I actually into this person? Did I convince myself that I was into this person? Because I was looking at my life from the experience of dating women, because I felt like to show that I was like girls and stuff. And I sort of looked at it from that perspective and thinking, well, maybe I just convinced myself that I was. And I sort of was asking people for advice, because and another part of it was I got very envious of gay couples. I love like two men, I guess. I would see like two men together, and I kind of feel like, I guess, a little bit of envy. And I sort of like thought maybe I'm just a gay boy with internalized homophobia or something. And I remember I also like asked on like Ask AGP or something like that in my what was it? A gay boy with internalized homophobia, or do I have pseudo bisexuality? And that was sort of how I guess I fully like confirmed that I was AGP, because in that sort of, I don't know if thread is the right word, I don't know what to call it, but in the comments I met two people who sort of like added me to a Discord where they sort of convinced me that I wasn't HSTS and that I was AGP, and sort of taught me about it in an even more depth than Ray Alex Williams did. And sort of like, I would explain my story to them, and they sort of like, you know, explain to me how this is an AGP characteristic, this is an AGP characteristic, all these things that you're describing are AGP characteristics. And that's sort of how like I started to first see myself as AGP, I guess.
Okay.
What were those characteristics?
I'd have to like think back and remember. I think some of it was they one of their interesting points was internalized homophobia, or some kind of like thing like that was an AGP characteristic, in the sense of like it's meta some kind of, I don't remember what they described it as, but it was a feeling of shame and that they said that that's a common with meta attracted AGPs. And so I forgot what other ones it was, I think. Yeah.
But that actually kind of conflicts with what you were saying about like seeing gay couples, like gay male couples, and feeling envy, like feeling like that's like cute or desirable or something. That's kind of what stands out to me most as not an AGP experience. Is a lot of I haven't, and this could be my ignorance here, but I've not heard just seeing like a male couple and thinking that is something enviable is not something commonly expressed, I don't think, or in my experience from AGPs. But also, I don't think it's, I don't know. This is a new thought to me. So sorry, carry on with what you were saying.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm inclined to agree with that, Aaron. Like, there's nothing stereotypically AGP about that. But I think back to our conversation with Skylar, and she talked about, you know, her experience at the gay bars when she was sort of like figuring out if she wanted to transition and like what was going on with her. And she was hooking up with guys sort of as a guy, and then also hooking up with guys presenting as a woman. And so there was definitely like an attraction. She felt drawn to gay culture, gay people. And that actually is, I think, kind of common for like not so online, even like AGPs, you know, or just like trans people in general, right? Like we call it the LGBTQ community for a reason. And so I think that's not that strange, but what's interesting, because that stuck out to me too, Aaron. It's interesting that you are feeling this sort of envy of the gay couples. And so I'm hearing you like wanting to be with men, but then you also this drive that you still have now to like transition and take it further than you did before, right? To like even change your body. And you described it earlier in terms of like assimilation, but again, I think that's like I don't know how like if I would use that word to describe it, right? Because it actually it's going to be a harder path, and actually it will make it'll make your pool of dating, you know, gay men much smaller, right? And so there's that to contend with, right? Those two things like sort of conflict a little bit.
Yeah.
What I'm also thinking is the the autosexual discomfort with heterosexuality. So I'm wondering if maybe that's what it is. It's like if you're with a man, you can be a man, like you can be a gay man with another man, but what you can't be is a man with a girlfriend. Does that feel accurate?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So like if you're going to be with a woman, you also should be a woman. Is that or non-binary or like not? Yeah, it's just like that discomfort with like being your own sex in a heterosexual relationship. That is the kind of fairly universal, AGP, AP experience,
That reminds me of like Annie's experience that she's talked about, right? And she also similarly her taste in women is masculine women, certain whether that's physically or like personality wise, FTMs, right? And so that sort of tracks. And she also describes that like before she was kind of understood her dysphoria as autoandrophobia and understood herself to be autogynephilic, she also would have fantasies and stuff and want to sort of be a gay guy. Because like you're saying, Aaron, it's like she really was uncomfortable being a man with a woman. So she, in her fantasies, would either be a gay man or a lesbian. And that is this really interesting thing, this discomfort with heterosexuality that does seem like a common denominator with auto heterosexuality.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never heard of that, but it makes a lot of sense. It definitely makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And so I'm curious, when you think about being with men, like how do you see yourself basically? Like
how do I see myself? I guess I suppose like being, I don't know, like I'm trying to think how to answer. I guess always like very much the feminine one. I've always like, even like before transition, I would always like say, oh, I want to be the girl in the relationship, I guess. I would say that a lot. I very much didn't want to wear the pants in the relationship, and I didn't. When I say like I don't want to be the girl, I mean I wanted to be the girl in the relationship. I don't mean like necessarily just like in bed. I mean like social roles, like the one the guy his arm around or etc. You know, that sort of kind of stuff. You know
No, that makes sense, and it's good that you brought that up, because that is something that oftentimes gets lost in this conversation about sexuality, is that it really goes beyond that, and there is the sort of behavioral and interpersonal AGP, if that's what we're calling it, where it's like you want to be treated in the feminine role, not just sexually, but sort of across the board. And that discomfort with playing the masculine role is also part of it, right? There's sort of this push and this pull. I guess I'm curious. So I'm interested to hear, like, in your own words, sort of why you think you are AGP, why you think that fits you best. And I ask this because for a couple of reasons. I guess partly selfishly, Aaron and I walk a tightrope, and there are people, not just Aaron and I, anyone having this conversation, and there are people who are very quick to say that like there's brainwashing going on, and people are convincing people that they're AGP and that this is the new gender ideology, and we're just getting people to take on a different label. And while that's certainly not my intention, and I don't think that's happening to any large extent, I'm conscious of that being a potential issue, right? Because we did see a similar proliferation with gender ideology. Now, I don't think this is as appealing, right? And it requires people to sort of make uncomfortable confessions and all of these things. But hey, people make uncomfortable confessions in cults and stuff. And do I feel like this is a cult? No. But I'm trying to set the stage to say, like, when you say that sort of these people came in and convinced you that you were AGP, I don't see that as nefarious, because I've been in some of these Discord channels, and it is people, frankly, sharing like textbook examples and sharing studies and sharing case studies and sharing anecdotes from their own experiences. But there is a militant belief in a lot of these spaces that, you know, basically most people with the gender fields are AGP. And so I want to know like how comfortable you are with that label, and why you feel like it accurately describes you.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to test you or anything.
Yeah, no, you're good. Also, like, sorry to just like bring this back again. You bringing up the Discord server again also remind me of another point that they made that was an AGP trait. Whenever I was with, I guess, women, or like kissing them or in relationships, I would always imagine that they were a man. And they brought up like I don't remember what, if it was an article or some kind of book or whatever. One of them brought up this image talking about how transvestites, when they were with their wives or sleeping in bed or anything like that, they would imagine that they were sleeping with a man. And so that was another thing that they sort of pointed out that was an AGB trait that I guess applied to me. But also to just answer your question,
Can I ask you a question before you answer? Because just
Yeah.
what you just said is interesting. I think the other side of that scenario is also interesting to me. So not just you imagining them as a man, but also like, are you imagining yourself as them, basically, or as a woman? And because something that I have heard before is, you know, autogynephiles who basically, when they're having sex with women or when they're being intimate with women, they're they basically are imagining that they're experiencing what she's experiencing, and vice versa. There's almost this like energetic exchange, right? That there's this swap going on mentally for them when they're engaging. So it's one thing to say that you're imagining that your partner is a man, but were you also imagining that you were a woman?
I don't know if I was imagining necessarily that I was the woman. I don't. Maybe there might have been at least one time that I might have done that.
Okay.
But if I'm like thinking about the specific times that I was referring to when I was talking about them, it was just more so I was just imagining I was doing the same thing, playing the same role, I guess, just with a man, I guess.
Okay.
But was this like at a time where you were like identifying as a trans woman or as a non? No.
It was
Okay.
completely before any kind of trans identification. It was back when, like I said, like I was dating women to sort of like be like, hey, I'm not actually gay. This guy was lying. I'm straight. Blah blah blah.
Okay.
You know?
Right.
Yeah. 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 To also like answer, I guess, Tali's question. I don't know if she's like gone or should I? Oh yeah.
No, I'm here.
But yeah. To answer like your question, like go back to that. I guess like I don't know if they're. I guess like sort of like all the sort of things I've talked about, like from the confusion between attraction and gender envy to the sort of getting a similar feeling I would get to a crush when looking at myself in the mirror, sort of stuff like that. And all the other sort of things that I've sort of talked about here, I guess, just sort of make me feel like I fit there. But like, I don't know. There's times where I think like if the existence of ROGD boys existed, I feel like maybe I'd fall into that category, but I'm also suspicious of if they exist and if they're just not a subset of like autogynephiles, I guess. Because like I said, like how I sort of stayed trans identified and how I became trans identified sounds similar to like this sort of ROGD story, I guess, like
Right.
transitioning after meeting a bunch of friends, staying transitioned out of fear of losing said friends, etc., like that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But again, like there's also the other things that like are signs of autogynephilia. So I don't know, I guess,
Yeah, no, I think your story is really interesting, and there have been a few people that I've encountered that their stories are just not so crystal clear that I don't feel like it matters for me to like make a clear declaration. But I'll just give you my non-professional, what I see from what you're describing. I agree with you that when you talk about the early trans identification and like sort of through middle school and high school, that it sounds very socially mediated. And so I hear what you're saying with the ROGD, and it's something that Aaron and I have talked about, and Ray has talked about too, is like ROGD sort of is happening also to autogynephiles essentially, right? And so they are getting swept up in this thing. They just also have, this like strong internal motivation. And so some of the things that you say do make it seem like that there was a lot of social mediation in your trans identity and sort of identity part of it, and that it seems like you have this predominant attraction to men, but the thing that really just kind of sticks out like a sore thumb is that despite calling yourself sort of a sister and thinking that you might be a gay man and all of this, and entering some gender critical spaces and sort of like knowing that it will only be harder to date men as a trans woman and stuff like that, that you still today feel a desire to try estrogen, right? And to try androgen suppressants and stuff like that. That to me lends itself to credence that you might be autogynephilic. Because it's like, what else in the theory with sort of ROGD and sort of ideological transition is that you can undo it by undoing the ideology, and you have done that to a large extent, and yet this desire persists for you. And I don't want to speak for all gay men, obviously. I can't speak for all gay men, but I've known plenty of gay men in my time, and it's not like they don't. I haven't heard them expressing discomfort with their sex drive, right? If anything, there tends to be more of a flaunting of their sex drive, and so that is another thing that rings, like you were talking about earlier. And maybe we can actually dive a little down the autoandrophobia route and what kind of things stand out for you there, because that's, to me, reads as very autogynephilic and not as homosexual sort of behavior.
Yeah, I guess, that's true. It doesn't, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. And again, we're not trying to catch you or anything.
Yeah, no, of course I know.
Yeah.
The reduction, pursuing reduction in libido is that being a benefit of transition, and then also just your very early puberty response to shaving off all of your body hair and things like that. It's like very that kind of jives with the auto androphobia experience, which doesn't seem to happen to gay men, or even the few HSTS, should they exist. I'm still not entirely convinced, but there's the pull to feminize is to attract, not because they're repulsed by their own masculinization, their own masculine body. It's the desire to attract, or at least theoretically that's how it's presented. But more innate distaste for masculinity or male libido, etc. does sound kind of pretty typically autogynephilic.
I heard that. I think I originally heard someone say that Annie said it or something like that, and that's how I sort of like heard about that, I guess. But
Heard about what?
about like how like repulsion to like sexuality or male sexuality
Yeah.
is autogynephilic or autoandrophobic sort of trait, which I find interesting. And also, like, I don't know how it, like, I was gonna say somehow like goes against the idea that like it's just a fetish.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, right. And this is where, you know, I always say, like, I'm not so concerned with the language, but Aaron beats on, and I really do agree with you. It's like, that's because it's really not helpful to try to conceptualize it that way for the overwhelming majority of people who have this experience. There do seem to be people for whom it is very explicitly and only erotic. But for many other people, especially the ones who develop dysphoria, there's these other things going on, and it is this repulsion, and this is the contradiction that's always sort of been present, even back to when Blanchard developed the typology, right? He was recognizing this as a paraphilia, as intrinsic to the person's sexuality, and also signing these people off for castration. I'm using the sort of pejorative word there for a reason, right? Because knowing that he's both identifying this as a sexually driven experience and believing that these people are going to be happier or satisfied by nuking their libido and their sexuality. And so, yeah, that is, and again, that just doesn't strike me as very gay. And maybe we're leaning too much into stereotypes here. Obviously, people are individuals. Not every gay man has a super high libido, but I don't know how common it is for gay men to want to eradicate their male sex drive. And, you know, Annie and Aaron and I have all talked about how this autogynephilic disgust for male sexuality is also how you get some of these both male and MTF gender criticals too, right? And like sort of feminists in that way, because they are disgusted by, you know, the trans sex workers, online sex workers and stuff like that. And they're disgusted by trans women who want to keep their penis and stuff like that, because it repulses them that anyone could possibly want, you know, male sexuality. So that's something that really sticks out in your description of your experience.
Yeah. Another thing, also bringing up like Annie and stuff, there was another thing I remember that they said that I think I sort of resonate with, and I think I heard them say it like in Phil Lily's interview, but until I sort of saw them describe it in sort of a Twitter thread with more depth about how they think that all their attraction is meta, is something I feel like in some ways I also resonate with, because again how they described it, they're all like a lot of the people, all the women they've ever been attracted to are masculine, or I guess, which is a similar experience to me, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm gonna take credit for that, because I feel like, and Annie will correct me if I'm wrong here, but as far as I understand, Annie got to that conclusion via sort of a conversation that we had, which is, it does seem like for a lot of autoheterosexuals that all of their sexuality, it has this metasexual sort of veil over it. It's all being sort of filtered through how they perceive themselves and sort of the sexual dynamic and the roles. And yeah, so it's like whether they are leaning into their metasexuality or their pseudo bisexuality and its interest in men, or even when it's interest in women, it's still masculine women, right? And women for whom they're going to feel more feminine in comparison. So yeah, I think that's interesting that resonates with you, because I feel like, yeah, that seems to be really true. Like the sort of metasexuality, to think of it only as sort of GayGP, right? Or only as the autoheterosexuals who are attracted to the same sex, is not I think it's actually more holistic than that, right? It really permeates. I think probably especially as you go through transition and stuff too, or sort of as that identity as the opposite sex solidifies.
Yeah.
I think the kind of phallometric testing is kind of flawed when it comes to AGP, just because even the target attraction that's being measured is still, in many cases, being filtered through a metasexual understanding of the self relative to that target, and there's no way to take into account So that's like what I'm talking about with like like Michael Bailey's research. Moon, are you familiar with?
I know of him. I don't know if I've read much of his like research or anything like that.
Okay. But I think well, in Blanchard also, Blanchard didn't use any like phallometric testing personally, right? He just combed through the existing sexology
Correct.
in that
I'm
regard.
pretty sure. Correct. And then sort of self-report from the patients that he was seeing. But I think that's correct.
Right.
I don't think
Right. But I think Blanchard in particular, so he's measuring basically, literally, he's measuring erections in response to pornographic content. And
Bailey,
yeah, Bailey, yes, excuse me. And so if you're like a AGP and he's showing you a picture of a naked man, he's thinking if you're aroused by that, you are a homosexual, right? Like if somebody has a strong erection to the image of a naked man, that is a homosexual. But that's not taking into account that a lot of, especially early onset AGPs have already kind of morphed into their sexuality a actual alloandrophilic attraction. So it's very possible that even though that their attraction to physical male bodies is rooted through the self-concept of the self as feminine or female relative to that target attraction. Anyway, again, I don't know how we scientifically measure what's going on in people's heads, but I honestly think, and here's some gender euphoria for the AGPs. I think in that regard, a lot of AGP sexuality is quite feminine, because I think a lot of female sexuality is rooted in that same. It's like you have to project yourself into the sexual scenario in order to find it arousing. It's not just, oh, that's a hot body, which is like more how male sexuality works. But for the AGP, it's more like yourself relative to that target. Rambling here, but I think there's a lot more to it than just target attraction when it comes to auto heterosexuals, because so much of meta is completely just woven into the entire sexuality experience.
Yeah,
I think that's right. Moon, I'm curious, have you ever been attracted to trans women?
Yeah. There was like two. They're not very passy ones though. They were very much like they looked like just twinks with long hair, honestly. Like, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Does it feel like, and this can be like hard to pin down, but so the way you're describing it, are you saying that you feel like you were attracted to them because they looked like men and they just incidentally were trans women, or you were kind of into the gender bending thing they were doing?
I don't really know if I think there was a point where I was attracted to, I guess, gender bending in some capacity. I guess like guys who look like girls, girls who look like guys. There was a point I think where I did sort of had that.
That's a very AGP trait.
Yeah.
Or very auto heterosexual thing.
No, I don't know. But like nowadays, I don't really see myself ever like dating, I guess, a trans woman personally.
Mm-hmm. Who do you see yourself dating?
Just men, honestly. Yeah. That's why I'm currently kind of looking for a partner, a man,
Right. I mean, I
because
guess like
you feel feminine relative to them. They need to be more masculine than you.
I don't know if that's sort of like, I don't know if possibly, I don't know. There have been like some guys where I like sort of felt that with, who I've been on like dates with, I guess. But I don't know if that's like the specific reason why I want to date men in general. Some of it's also like, I'm genuinely attracted to like some of these guys, especially like my current boyfriend, I guess. I'm very, very much like attracted to him. I don't look at him in like a sense of like,
good. That's important.
Yeah. I don't look at him and says, oh, he makes me feel more feminine. No, like I'm genuinely attracted to him, look at him and, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, totally. And we believe that. And that's why we think it is sometimes like an oversimplification to say that meta is just sort of like using someone for those, for those means to affirm someone's gender. So you have a boyfriend. How does he feel about, is your boyfriend gay? Like, how does your boyfriend identify?
He's bisexual. Interesting enough, I've had people speculate if he's AGP. I very much deny it because I've like talked to him about it. He knows about the typology. He's also seen some of my interviews. He's probably gonna watch this too.
Cool.
Yeah, but like he doesn't, like, I've described it to him in like a bunch of different ways, and like he doesn't resonate with it. He doesn't feel like, no, like, and I'm like, even like GAMP, he doesn't really resonate with either. Like I described it to him, he's like, yeah, no, I just not really. you know, but yeah, he's bisexual.
Does being, so when you were saying that, I was about to say, what kind of guys are you going for? So like, does being bisexual or being straight matter to you? Are you looking for gay guys?
Right now I don't really care about the sexuality, but there was a very long time where I did, and that was like a big motivator for why I kind of wanted SRS. I didn't want to be with a bisexual guy who saw me as the best of both worlds, and I didn't want to be with a gay guy who saw me as an effeminate gay man. And that was like a big reason in the past why I wanted bottom surgery.
So they would see you as a woman in the relationship?
Yeah, just like an average woman, not like this, like I said, best of both worlds, or just another effeminate gay man or whatever, you know?
Yeah, that's very interesting. That makes a lot of sense. And I've heard from what I understand, it's relatively common for autogynephiles to want to be with bisexuals, whether that's bisexual women or bisexual men, right? Because it sort of leaves, it's like, this person is not only going to be attracted to me based on my sex, right? They're at least open to being attracted to people of the opposite sex. So there's the potential for them to see me in that way. But I hadn't considered the other side of that, which is if you're dating someone bisexual, the sort of insecurity of, are they going to see me as both, basically, right? Are they seeing me as specifically filling that and still seeing, my sex that I'm not comfortable with? Yeah, I mean, this part of the conversation to me feels like really autosexual, feels really AGP, and less homosexual. I won't say HSTS because again, there are people who will argue that HSTS is basically just the gay men experiencing stigma, right? Like Bailey said one time, and I agreed with him, and it's probably a harsh way to put it, and it's not a perfect thing to say, but basically, like, in theory, HSTS could be eliminated by like an accepting society and sort of accepting parents, right? It's like if all young flamboyant children were little boys were able to grow up and just be accepted, and they didn't feel the shame and the stigma, they wouldn't be motivated to transition. But so some people will argue, though, that HSTS is actually separate from homosexuals, right? That in the desistance literature, there's the 90% who are just the regular homosexuals that grow up to, just be gay. And then there's the 10% that are supposed to be somehow different, right? And so I'm always like hesitant to speak about what the HSTS experience is. I don't really feel like I entirely understand it because I don't feel like there are that many HSTS out there for us to really, get to know and understand their story. But yeah, that description doesn't sound very stereotypically homosexual to me. Like, I don't think it's a common thing for gay men to think, oh, well, it would be better if I were to, have a neo-vagina, because then at least people wouldn't see me as a man. That doesn't strike me as a normal homosexual psychology.
Yeah, definitely.
When you were originally believing yourself to be HSTS, was that? I mean, it does sound like obviously a lot of your attraction to men, it seems, very kind of genuine and organic, and so it'd be easy to therefore identify yourself with the HSTS category. But you've also experienced attraction to women, especially more masculine women. I'm wondering if you're, like, when you were presented with the dichotomy, the two different, the two ideologies of AGP, this one being the, gross fetishist, and this one being the kind of relatable and, typically gay one, is that why you predominantly identified with the HSTS? Is it just because you felt like the AGP category was just so completely unrelatable and so very different than your experience?
I don't know if it was like, because it was so different. I thought, like, for a while before, like, again, like, there was a point between when I first discovered the typology and then watched Ray Alexis Williams, there was a long time I just thought it isn't right. There's people like who are bisexual,
Right.
and
Okay. Right.
yeah, and I
Right.
just thought like, you know, oh, this is like, it isn't just, it's a whole, it's not like, that's not how it is. And when I sort of first discovered it, I don't know if I was necessarily drawn to HSTS because I thought that sort of mindset. I definitely feel like there was a part of me that was like, this is a relief when I heard Ray Alex Williams say, yeah, that sounds like a lot like a HSTX experience. There was a part of me, I feel like, that had some kind of relief, but I don't know if that was like a motivator for why I considered myself it, I guess. Like that I saw like, this is the horrible and this is, you know.
Right. Yeah. Fair.
Yeah.
So does your boyfriend know that you still have thoughts about wanting to transition and feeling like you need to sort of test that out for yourself?
Yeah, definitely. We've talked about that. Yeah.
What does he think?
He doesn't mind. He's like, he doesn't care. He's like, if you want to transition, you know, if you don't want to, don't, you know, like, don't let other people affect like which way you choose, you know, that kind of, you know, that's sort of like how we talk. We had like that discussion. He doesn't really mind either way. He doesn't mind if I get bottom surgery, if I don't get bottom surgery. He doesn't mind if I transition, I don't transition. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And yeah, that's good that you're in a relationship where you're just like being open about all that and that he's open to it also. I mean, keep in mind the fact that things could change, right? You know, when they become real.
Yeah.
But also maybe they won't, because it sounds like maybe your boyfriend is GAM. If he's just like open to that, you know, it's not super typical to just be like, yeah, I could take it or leave it, you know, type of thing. But again, I'm happy for you that is how he feels. Obviously, vaginoplasty is like pretty serious, right? And we know a lot of people for whom it went really wrong, and we know people who still really want it, right? And it's your life and your body, but just take that seriously and slowly.
Yeah.
Would be my
Of course.
advice.
Yeah. Anytime if you're not dealing with like absolutely intense, debilitating dysphoria, yeah, just steer clear of that one is my pretty strong advice. Yeah.
Is there anything that you still want to talk about that you feel like we didn't get to yet?
I feel like there might have been like one thing. I don't know. Not like that. I think there might have been one thing, but I forgot what it was.
Okay.
Yeah. But not anything that I can remember off the top of my head, I guess.
Aaron, you got anything left?
No. Covered everything I wanted to touch on.
Yeah, this is a cool conversation. I appreciate you coming on and being open to our questioning. Again, it felt like we were interrogating you a little bit, but I think it's just interesting. I'm glad you didn't take offense to any of it. It's interesting to flesh this stuff out. And I think your story is probably not uncommon for a lot of like the young trans identified people that we're seeing today. So I hope that people see this who might be in a similar situation. And wish you luck on your journey.
Thank you.
Such. And we'll be in touch for sure.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thanks
Thank you
so much
for having me on. Of course.
Thank you.